Okay, so what I'm going to do is address the topic of open process automation developments directly. Let me just get right into it with the headlines. Headline number one is OPAS version 2.1 final is published this week. I'm going to spend about half of my time at the podium saying why is that significant? What's different? Okay, so just bear with me on that one. Frank, this is the fifth publication of the OPAS standard, just to give you some sense of its maturity. But again, half of my talk will be a drill down on the significance of that headline. The second headline is we're really pleased to announce that the Open Process Automation Conformance certification activity will start in earnest. I don't have an exact date, but as precise as we can be is mid-2023. Again, I'm going to detail this in my remarks so that you can start to see that certification of products is going to become a reality very, very quickly. Okay, that's part of what's happening in the forum. Headline number three is a lot of work within the forum is to produce a set of documents that we call the adoption guides. There will be, these will address each of the stakeholder groups in the OPA business ecosystem. I have one slide that will detail this, but basically you can consider this a de-risking activity. A lot of the people with skin in the game are articulating what their concerns are and what the risk mitigation steps are to help people overcome the inertia and fear of trying. Okay, that's what these adoption guides are all about. They're not published yet. They're still being written and reviewed within the forum, but I think this is a significant de-risking activity that the forum will make available to the industry. Item number four, and I'm going to have one slide here that's going to give you the overview of all the operating company projects that have been announced in terms of test beds, field trials, and prototypes. So just one slide, and I won't detail a lot, but be happy to answer questions. And the fifth and final headline embodies in it what Harry mentioned. Really pleased to announce collaborations among the OPA forum with other standards development organizations and industry associations. I'm going to highlight two of them. One with the OPC Foundation regarding field exchange. The second one is a collaboration with NAMUR and the German association ZVEI that involves module type package. So I'll have a couple of slides on that as well. So let's get into so what's the big deal about OPAS version 2.1? I tried to distill it down to like the top three significant items. And number one is with the developments in OPAS Part 1 and Part 7. The part numbers are not significant to the talk. But what we have done is provide a lot of clarification and further specification of these devices called distributed control nodes that appear in the OPA reference architecture. This will focus the effort on what products are going to be and a lot of what conformance certification is in actual practice. The second point there in terms of what's significant in OPAS version 2.1 final, this is a story of incorporating feedback from industry. So some of the more innovative things about the Open Process Automation Standard is how we're incorporating innovations from the IT world into OT service. One example of that is in the systems management technology, and I'm going to detail this in a minute. But the point is that version 2.1 preliminary was met with a bit of question from the supplier community about the practicality of meeting the conformance requirements pertaining to systems management. So we deliberated, we took that feedback in from the supplier community, and compromises and adjustments were made in version 2.1 final to make it practically achievable for the suppliers. And I'll elaborate further when I get into that part of my talk. We added a new part document, part 6.5, that incorporates the IEC 61499 standard. That's a completely new add with version 2.1 final. And the last comment that I guess that's, I wanted to, there's one other comment here that got left out of the slide deck, but let me make it verbally. And I'm going to be synthesizing or paraphrasing things that I've heard multiple people saying, including my colleague Bob Hagenel. Version 2.1 is now clear enough and specific enough for us to start building products and systems. And I want to leave that thought with you guys as a statement of significance of the maturity of the OPAS standard. Okay, so I'm not going to go too techie on y'all. I promised that to Harry. But I do want to get into this question about clarifying and specifying the distributed control node. So this is a picture of the OPAS reference architecture. This drawing has been out since 2017. And the three basic concepts: distributed control node, acronym DCN, the networking and data communications technology, the OPAS connectivity framework, OCF, and then the advanced compute platform, this device here. And if you look carefully, you'll see DCN smattered everywhere in this diagram. Okay, so if it's everywhere, what is it? Okay, so what you see, there are multiple profiles, multiple instances of DCNs that are depicted in this reference architecture, and they're both physical and virtual realizations of the DCN in this concept. And that's confused a lot of people. So let me drill down on that. So this is a chart. It's like a decoder ring that was actually produced by the OPA's business working group, not the technologists themselves. But I wanted to lead this slide off with the definition of product. This is part of it's in the certification guide of the OPA's document set. But a product is defined as a supplier's commercial offering that implements one or more profiles defined in the OPAS standard. So a profile is a collection of conformance requirement units. Let me first talk about the five figures that are on this chart. So this is a distillation of that OPAS, the OPA reference architecture, into the specific instantiations of a distributed control node. You know, this configuration, it was, at the time this chart was drawn, it was called DCN-IO. We've now started to call this the IO node. This is an instantiation. These lines depict connections to field devices. This line depicts connection to the OCF. The second figure is what we call the DCN compute node, no direct connections to field devices. I'll jump to this one in the interest of being efficient in time. Here's a configuration called DCN gateway, which has this connection to proprietary protocols at one of the interfaces of the distributed control node device. And this is just a depiction of the advanced control platform in the same taxonomy. Now, you can't read the text. All of these colored rectangles are references to the specific profiles in the OPAS standard. So I'm going to drill down on we're going to do an expanded view of these two figures, the IO node and the DCN compute device, where you can actually start to see the text in the profile boxes. So this is what suppliers have to make and submit for conformance certification, right? So the DCN IO device, it has whatever electronics and circuitry are required for the A to D conversion, et cetera. That's what this IO modules are meant to depict. But the taxonomy, the syntax here is the OPAS part document that's referred to, a one-word description of what the subject matter is, and these letter dash number things are the profile identifiers in the OPAS standard. So I'll detail only this one, and I'll just say what's different in the DCN compute node, okay? So you have the physical connection. So this is port standard conformance units pertaining to ports and connectors are in this part 7 physical platform with that profile designator. You have the network technology, the conformance units pertaining to networking are in this pink one. The yellow and this purple box are the OPAS conformance profiles that pertain to systems management. The cybersecurity conformance requirements are represented in this profile. And then you have higher level functions regarding the I/O services within the I/O node. So what you'll note in the I/O node has no provision for user-written applications in it. The DCN compute node, the only thing I'm going to call out as difference without restating all this stuff is these profiles up here that are in part 6 of the OPAS standard collect the conformance units pertaining to user-written control or any type of computing application that will be hosted on a DCN compute node. So a lot of like technical detail, but this is what's required to make products in the space. That's the significance of this. So those charts were of a logical nature. I wanted to spend maybe a minute or two getting a little bit more physical. So this is a physical realization of the I/O node. This is a more physical realization of the DCN compute node. You see connectivity to the field devices here, go through the I/O modules. This is, tends to be circuitry per se, into a device typically called a head unit in today's products. The essential characteristic, however, is this is where the OPCUA client server or a publisher subscriber will reside that is either producing or receiving OPAS signals. So this is an industry standard interface that's defined here to transmit data, let's say, from sensors or to receive signals going to actuators through that interface. So here's a PID loop. I don't have to explain to this audience what that is. The only other thing I want to highlight here is this construct that has the acronym OCFB. So this is the OPCUA construct that it's a mechanism. It's just simply a mechanism to facilitate the OPCUA connectivity between the I/O and the compute device, and the essential concept, the pain point that is being addressed by the OPAS standard is this is an industry standard interface to achieve interoperability and between these two functional modules and interchangeability of modules performing this function or this function. Okay, so this is making it work in practice. I want to shift gears now and leave that, and I want to move now to conformance certification. So I already said it's going to start mid-2023, and what are the profiles that are in scope for what we call Conformance Wave 1A? Okay, these are the DCP profiles are the ones that pertain to the physical aspects of the DCN devices. Relatively a few conformance requirements now, mostly about ports and connectors at present. There are 2 profiles for networking that will be in the scope of Wave 1A certification. OPCUA, only client server in this first wave. Publish, subscribe will come later. The applicable cybersecurity aspects are in scope of 1A. The one I wanted to really highlight, however, are the OSM, which stands for Systems Management. So the IT technology that is being incorporated and referenced in the OPAS standard is one called Redfish, produced by an organization, has the acronym DMTF, Distributed Management Task Force. There's 2 profiles for systems management. one that embodies an integrated circuit called the Baseboard Management Controller, BMC chip. The other one is that provides that function, but in a software-only means. So this is the point that I made earlier, that there was, based on feedback from the supplier community in particular, we adapted the Part 5 of the OPAS spec to make it practically achievable for suppliers to bring products forward for conformance certification. We have a number of labs that will be performing the independent verification testing, with the open group itself being the certification authority. Conformance will eventually result in a registry of certified products that the end users and systems integrators can refer to so that they can buy with confidence. I guess, there's a lot of confidentiality regarding product certification, so I'm not going to name any names here, but what basically was the critical path for us to get to this point was to make sure that we had a critical mass, a sufficient number of suppliers willing to bring products forward for conformance certification. So we passed that prerequisite activity based on a lot of hard work by folk, and this is a very significant milestone for us in terms of the maturity of this initiative that we're all undertaking. Okay, moving on. I wanted to give you just one slide on the adoption guide, and again, I just call it a preview. So what's its objective? The objective is to provide information for consideration, regardless of what stakeholder role you are in the business ecosystem, for your adoption and implementation of open process automation systems. And like I say, there'll be the perspectives of each of the stakeholder categories will be addressed. I'm only going to illustrate what we say for the end users. Each of the perspectives takes a life cycle perspective that starts with awareness at one end and going all the way through. Again, this is for the end users, enhancements and upgrades. So we try to address the full life cycle of an instance of a control system. I'm going to throw up a lot of words now, and these are just a sample of some of the questions that are asked and answered in the adoption guide. So, where do I find out about certified products and suppliers? What is the process for qualifying systems integrators? A lot of the concerns and the risks and the fears that we hear people talking about, we've tried to, put our best heads together, collect the wisdom of the group and address these important questions that people are asking. Who's responsible for system performance? How is project engineering and cost reduced? How do we recognize trusted service providers? How do we do patches and upgrades? How do we expand the systems? All of these types of questions are addressed substantively in the adoption guide that, I expect we'll have it published within a couple of months, at least the end user and the systems integrator versions. Okay, moving on. So this is one chart that lets me talk about the end user prototyping projects. This is the operating company spending money. Ryan did a very good job explaining this whole process. The syntax of this table this is from top to bottom, more or less chronological order of the announcements by the operating companies that they were doing, test beds, prototypes, field trials using OPA. In this dimension is the degree of maturity, if you will, or the amount of technical readiness, TRL demonstration that is being done. So I'm not going to elaborate too much. I'm going to make a couple of points here. Ryan talked about this journey quite extensively. Jan from BASF is here. This goes back to about 5 or 6 years ago. BASF built a small demonstration unit embodying OPA, NAMUR open architecture, and module type package. So that's what that line item addresses. The one that I do want to highlight, because we have a lot of firsthand knowledge of this one, at the June 2022 ARC Forum, the most recent one, not counting this one, Snorri Larsen of Equinor announced that Equinor was going to contract my company for a COPA, Coalition for Open Process Automation, Quick Start System and Training Program. So COPA is a coalition of 14 companies on the foundation of CSI and Seaplane AI. That's the reference to Bob Hagenow earlier. We had an exhibit of the COPA system here at the ARC Forum. Anyway, I'm pleased to report that that the system was built for Equinor, and we have completed our obligations to Equinor for the training program that they paid for. We've completed that a couple of weeks ago. So that's just to give you a tangible piece of data regarding this entry in this chart. And I can't help but noting this morning that Alan from Shell must have mentioned open process automation. I lost count at around 12 times. I think Alan's comments this morning mentioned OPA at least 12 times. So clearly, the executive ranks of the operating companies beyond ExxonMobil, they know what's going on. So I'll leave it at that. Be happy to answer questions during a Q&A period. Okay. Finally, my fifth topic in the headlines. So the collaborations that I mentioned in my headline really, what I'm going to talk about, really got going with a meeting that we had, and I already mentioned the organizations, but a meeting that we had in Berlin in October of 2022. We went into those meetings knowing more or less who was going to attend, having an agenda, having objectives, but frankly, there was just a lot of hope. I mean, we went into that meeting not knowing exactly what the outcome is going to be, and it was frankly a stunning success as far as I was concerned. So we had these two basically high-level objectives that I've bulleted here. And this is just a team photo on a lovely fall day in Berlin. But okay, so what happened? What was the significance? I've got one slide on each of those two collaborations, and then I'm going to be done. So the first one on OPC Field Exchange. And this is being actually exhibited by the OPC Foundation folks out in the hallway here. But let me summarize what Field Exchange is really about. It's about defining OPC UA interfaces for the following categories of data transactions. Controller to controller. The syntax of this chart is if it's a black circle, it's in the scope of the initiative cited. Then controller to device. I scored it this way, that it's half in the scope. We define the OPA scope boundary at the field-facing side of the I/O node. So that's clearly of interest to OPA, but partially out of scope in terms of what FX is going after. The third category of data communications that the FX group is working on is device to device. So that's out of scope for OPAS, but there's still plenty of intersection and a lot of opportunities to avoid conflict, wheel reinvention, confusion, by aligning on what we do in these areas where there is a clear intersection. So just to summarize what happened at that Berlin meeting, I listed action items here, a one-line summary, and who is tasked with leading the actions to follow. Okay, so Converge, the OPAS engines, I already cited the OCFB construct, with what FX calls the connection manager that provides similar functionality here. And Jeff Harding from ABB is leading this action team. The second one, establish use cases and requirements for redundancy. Paul Brooks of Rockwell is leading that follow-up. And I skipped number 3 because this number 3 still requires further definition, but the one that was chartered to go ahead has to do with the use of automation ML, AML is the acronym for that, to enable the integration of workflows among these related initiatives, OPAS, FX, and MTP, and Emmanuel Kolb from ABB is leading that. And what I listed here, just to close out the news I'm sharing here, is just the names of the companies whose engineers volunteered or were volunteered, to work on these action items. And finally, this is the one that Harry mentioned regarding MTP. So there's two parts of this chart, the top part and then the bottom part. So this idea about are OPA and MTP and NOAA, are they competitive? Are they conflicting? That question has been out there for quite some time when these ideas were first surfaced and really understood only as buzzwords. I really have to give Michael Kraus of BASF the credit for connecting the dots. And this is a chart that Michael and Jorn Obczynski from Siemens drew that has been presented at NAMUR. And what I want you to see, this is a simplification of the OPAS reference architecture, but what it shows is where MTP, which is the interface between the controls on a modular process unit, a skid unit, whatever you want to call it, and the control system. I mean, Michael realized that MTP could provide that function and be integrated into the OPA reference architecture. Okay, so fast forward to today in the Berlin meeting. So the two action items that were first defined was to conduct and build a demonstration of the integration of process equipment assemblies. That's another way of talking about the skid or the modular process unit. Demonstrate the integration of virtual instances of PEAs with an OPAS system. So this is a wireframe sketch of what we consider to be the minimum viable demonstration that we will be working to build this demonstration as we proceed in 2023, with the goal of having something to show by the NAMUR General Assembly meeting that takes place in November. I'm leading this activity, and as I did on the other slide, a list of the companies that have volunteered to participate. This is not a closed club activity. I mean, we're making these announcements so that if you are members of these associations that are collaborating and you want to get involved, you're welcome to do so, and please get in touch with the folk that I mentioned as the leads. So just to close, to give some closing remarks here, I mind kind of a recurring theme that's in the adoption guide, and I want to be really clear about this. What's kind of gets cited over and over again in the adoption guide is that knowledge and experience with the OPAS standard is the key for success for end users, systems integrators, suppliers, and service providers to take advantage of open process automation. This is a slightly different way of saying what Ryan said earlier about if you want to go after these benefits, you do have to get skilled up in it. And if you wait to just read the publications afterward, you're guaranteed to be a couple of years behind where the action is. Recurring theme about a key for success. And Jaco Ootmeer of Shell, with whom is my fellow co-chair in the OPA forum, his number one priority for the forum in 2023 is, Jaco calls it end user activation. It's what do we have to do to get the end users involved? So the standard is we're going to be pushing into new territory, which involves vetting what's being proposed technologically to be incorporated in the standard and helping us prioritize the work. So, I appreciate that it's very difficult for engineers in the operating companies to get deeply involved in the technical details of standard writing. Everyone acknowledges that's a challenge. But, when you're on the buy side of this business ecosystem, you really need to be forthcoming with articulating what your use cases are, what your requirements are as best you can, and work with the standards creation activity to vet and prioritize what gets incorporated in the standard to make it of use to you and your company. So that's what I want to just leave. You know, I often issue this call to action. We recognize the difficulty of the engineers and the operating, the end user companies to get involved in standards work. It's not a lot of money. We realize it's a call on time. But if you really want to succeed at this, that knowledge and experience with the standard and participating in its making is how you can de-risk and improve your chances for success. So with that, I'll close. Thank you very much.